So it's 7. Hi guys, welcome to this live session where I would like to talk about photography. Well, my name is Bobby Roy and I am a photographer and writer by profession. So before I go ahead, I would like to thank Graphy India for inviting me for this live session. I think this is going to help a lot of you out there who want to get into photography or who want to get into it professionally, I should say that. So if just in case you don't know, Graphy is an online learning app where you can go through their videos, learning videos, which are called Graphies, and learn about whatever it is that you want to learn about. In this case, photography. Also, you can use my subscription code, that's Bobby Roy, BOBBYROY, all one word, to get a discount on any subscription that you choose on the Graphy app. Also in the description below. I'm sorry guys, the app crashed it seems. Anyhow, so coming back to what I was saying, so Graphy, just in case you do not know, is an online learning app where you can go through the videos which are called Graphies. And also, just in case you are on either of the platforms, that's iOS or Android, you can go ahead and download the Graphy app right now and use my subscription code, that's Bobby Roy, BOBBYROY, to get a discount. Also, the link would be provided in the description below as well. So you can go ahead and download the app and use the subscription code to get a discount. All right, so now that that's over, let's get on to the real stuff, talking about photography. So what do we cover in this session? Well, I'll start with what photography is all about, and of course move on from there, as in, what does a good photograph constitute of, and how do you create some good pictures. Also the fact that photography is a lot more about than just creating good pictures. I mean, it's a lot more, as you will realize in this live session. Also, if you have any questions, you can leave your questions. I would try to answer as many questions as possible, because of course I understand that being a newcomer or being an amateur or being somebody who is a newbie, you guys will have a lot of questions to ask me as far as photography is concerned, as far as going professional with photography is concerned. So let me start off by what is photography? Well, if I just outline the term photography, it's generally writing with light. Now, photography is all about light. I have said this on my earlier webinars, on my earlier seminars, on all my workshops which I take all over the country, that photography first and foremost is all about light. If you understand light, if you know how to look at good light, if you know how to judge good light, I think half of your job is done. So photography is all about light, and then comes the rest of it. Of course, photography is more than just looking at light, because you also need to understand the fact that you have to have some kind of basic knowledge to be able to create pictures. Now this, I don't say you have to have a lot of technical knowledge, because what I've also seen is if somebody has a lot of technical knowledge, he or she confuses the technical knowledge while creating pictures. So you need to understand that you need to have a certain amount of knowledge while you are creating pictures, or if you want to get into photography, and then while you are creating pictures, they say on the job you grow. So yes, a basic knowledge is required to create good pictures, but then again, it is not the only thing that's required. So let me get on to how I started photography. So I was initially a writer. I used to write for a lot of travel related portals. I used to work for a travel related company. And then one fine day, they asked me if I can create some pictures for them when they sent me to a travel assignment. I had no idea how to create pictures back then. This was, I think, about 10 or 12 years back, a long time back. I had no idea how to create pictures. In fact, I had no idea how to even use a camera. But that didn't stop me from exploring, from reinventing myself. They say you should keep adding stuff to your portfolio. So I thought, why not just create a few pictures and see where it goes? So it was a 15-day trip. I came back with some great pictures. That's what they said. That's what I was told. And they loved the pictures, and they thought, why not I also do the job of a photographer? So of course, it was a lot of pressure on me, but as I see it right now, as I see it after a decade, I think in the hindsight, what happened was really, really nice. I learned a new trick of the trade. I learned how to create pictures, and of course also the fact that it gave me a whole new perspective to my career is something which I am always thankful about. Well, there are certain people here who are saying hi. Hi guys, if you have any questions, please leave your questions here. I would try to answer your questions as soon as possible. And yeah, okay. All right, so that was the start. That was how I started my journey in photography. I majorly shoot automotive, cars, bikes, commercial vehicles and stuff. I also shoot a lot of travel. I also make a lot of short films, corporate films and stuff like that. So that's how my photography career started. I mean, it was a very, very small step, and that is how you start. You take small steps and then you move forward. Also, the fact that I did not have any equipment didn't really stop me from exploring this art of photography, because of course, if you have equipment, if you have good equipment, that will help you grow. But equipment is not the only thing that's necessary. If I give you a mobile phone, I mean, if you have good knowledge, good knowledge about photography, I'll give you a mobile phone or an expensive camera. You can create some good pictures, or vice versa. If you have zero knowledge, zero technical knowledge, doesn't matter if I give you a couple of lakh rupee worth camera or a 50,000 rupee phone. I don't think you will be able to do much, because you do not have the knowledge what it takes to be a photographer, what it takes to create some good pictures. Now, coming on to photography, what are the essential stuff that you need to create some good pictures? Of course, you need to understand light. Also, what you need to understand is the fact that how your equipment works. I've seen a lot of people who are out shooting and who are always confused about how to create good pictures, or how do they actually go ahead and take necessary steps to create good pictures, and they keep fiddling with their equipment, whether it be a camera or a mobile phone, doesn't matter. The moment you start fiddling with your equipment, I think that exact moment is gone. So you need to understand, first and foremost, that you need to understand your equipment better. So you need to understand the different, probably different options in the camera better to be able to create good pictures. And then you need to understand what you are creating, or what you are envisioning as a creator should also, connect well with your viewer. So you should be able to understand what you are creating is, of course, telling a story. Photography is all about telling stories through these pictures. So that is also the reason why I love this visual medium, because it is mostly about creating stories through the pictures. So, I mean, there are people here who are asking a lot of questions. Sir, how can we click long exposure from mobile? Well, Priyanshu, there are a lot of options to create long exposure photography through mobile. There is a pro mode where you can go in and then control the shutter speed accordingly. So it's a long process, of course, but also you need to understand, like I was just saying, if you start fiddling with your camera gear, that's when you miss the opportunity to create some good stories, to create some good pictures. Now, somebody like me who does a lot of corporate work, I hire a lot of people to do work for me or to assist me. What I always make them understand is the fact, before they even come to the job, I make them understand that you need to understand how your equipment works before you understand what we are actually shooting. So you need to understand the equipment better. You need to understand how light works. Now, how light works is in itself a very, very vast field. It's a vast topic. I mean, the more you shoot, the more you study light, I think the more you understand, the more you better understand light. So you need to understand the fact that you need to go out and shoot a lot of pictures, a lot of stories, to understand how light works. Now, I have been asked a lot many times, sir, does equipment matter? I wouldn't lie to you. Yes, equipment does matter. It does matter what you are using, but do not let the equipment, be a hindrance to how you are shooting. I think I've seen a lot of people who buy expensive cameras and then they had no idea how to take pictures. So I would suggest you get whatever you can afford. These days, if I'm not shooting professionally, I majorly shoot with my mobile phone, which is a Samsung mobile phone. I mean, I shoot with anything, it's not necessary if I have an expensive equipment, an expensive camera or an inexpensive phone. What matters is that I go out and shoot. the entire process of creating picture is something which I enjoy, and the moment you start enjoying this process of creating pictures is, I think, the moment you realize that how much you actually love and value photography. Of course, there are certain rules which you need to follow in photography as well. You just cannot go out and create pictures blindly. But then again, first and foremost, you should be able to understand your equipment better. Secondly, you should also understand the fact that light works in different ways in different times of the day. So I majorly shoot either early morning, just after sunrise, or actually I am at the location well before sunrise. So if sunrise is happening at, I don't know, 5:30 or 5:45 in the morning, I would be at the location by 4:30 in the morning, so that I can scout out my position, scout out the location where I need the subject at, and then as the sun comes up, I'm all set to create pictures. Also, if I'm shooting in the evening, I make sure that I scout out the locations beforehand where the sunset is going to happen, and also I am there at the location well before time, so that I can understand that sunset is happening, and I can study the light then and there, and then take my steps accordingly. Because also the fact that I am mostly shooting under natural light, if I am shooting under natural light, it is not really under my control. So that is also the fact that I go into the location a lot early, and then study the location, recce the location beforehand, and then take the steps necessary to create pictures. Of course, if I'm shooting in artificial light, if I'm shooting inside a studio, if I have control over the light, then nothing matters. But then again, controlling light and studying light is also a different subject matter altogether, which probably we'll discuss at a later stage. But this live session is mostly about basics of photography, and of course, how can you get better at creating pictures. All right, I think a few people are asking a few questions. All right, Prerna Gupta asks, which phone is best for shooting videos, how to create a depth in the image? Well, for any phone is good for creating pictures. I generally prefer a phone which has good dynamic range. Now, what is dynamic range? Dynamic range is the difference between highlight and shadow. So you need to understand there are two essentials in a photograph: the highlights, which are the brightest part of an image, and the shadows, which are the darkest part of an image, and the balance between the two is what we call dynamic range. So mobile phones these days have fantastic camera sensors. I personally love mobile phones. I am always carrying a mobile phone. Everybody is carrying a mobile phone. Maybe there are times you are not carrying your camera with you, but I am absolutely sure you are always carrying a mobile phone. So a mobile phone with good dynamic range is a must. A mobile phone which does decently well in low light, I would say, is a must. I personally shoot with Samsung phones because I've been used to Samsung phones. I have seen a lot of people use Google Pixels, iPhones, Vivos, Oppos, OnePlus, whatnot. I am not really a brand conscious person. I don't generally suggest a specific brand as such, but if you can afford any phone, just go ahead and of course shoot. The shooting process is what creates pictures, remember, not the equipment. Also, somebody asked how to create depth in the pictures. Well, if you are shooting with mobile phones, I would suggest you go to the live focus or the depth focus option, and then try and take it from there, because I think live focus is what creates the depth in the images. All right, so somebody else asks me, does more megapixel matter or better sensor? Well, that's very easy for me. So somebody like me, I think a better megapixel camera does not really matter. If the sensor is better, that is what matters. I am always somebody who is after bigger sensors. So you would see somebody who is working as a professional, somebody like me who uses DSLRs or mirrorless, would always go for something called full frame sensor. Now, full frame sensor is bigger in size. I would not go into the detail because that would require a lot of mathematical calculations. We might not have time or the right place for this right now. So let me just put it very in a very subtle way. The bigger the sensor, the more light it will gather, and as a result, the less grain it will have. Of course, higher megapixel is really nice if you want to crop your images really nicely. But then again, for example, if I'm shooting with a mobile phone and my mobile phone has, say, 100 megapixels, because the size of the mobile phone sensor is really small, spreading those 100 megapixels in that small sensor will be tough, as compared to something like a full frame sensor which has 30-35 megapixel would be really nice, because the sensor is bigger, so the pixels can be spread in a very easy way, which means the light capturing capability of a bigger sensor is way better than a smaller sensor. So yeah, just to answer your question, somebody like me would prefer a bigger sensor as compared to a higher megapixel. So there you go. All right, so moving on, what else? I mean, camera equipment is of course necessary, and affordability. Of course, I am also somebody who completely believes in the fact that buy something which you can afford. Of course, if you go to a camera shop, if you go to a mobile phone to buy cameras, you would see that there are all sorts of expensive cameras there on the shelf, but do not go overboard with your budget. Of course, if I have a budget of say 50,000 rupees in my pocket and I am buying a camera worth 30 or 35,000 rupees, I can then spend the rest 15,000 rupees in getting a good lens. Now I'm talking about getting a camera, I'm not talking about getting a mobile phone in this specific example. So you should understand that getting a camera and a lens is way better than going over the budget and getting a camera which you might not even value down the line. Also, somebody who is asking me, I think it's Priyanshu. Priyanshu asks me which camera is good for beginners. Well, I would suggest camera between say 20 and 30,000 is way more than enough for beginning out in photography. These days, I think mirrorless systems are catching up very nicely. You can go for any mirrorless camera, or even if you're going for a DSLR camera, I think anywhere between 25,000 to 35,000 rupee budget is perfect for starting out. Brand does not matter. I use Canon equipment because I've been using Canon equipment all my life. You can use Nikon, you can use Olympus, you can use Sony, Panasonic, Kodak, whatever is available. Any camera is good as far as I am concerned. I am just concerned about the kind of budget that you spend in your camera. So anywhere between 25 and 35,000 I think is way more than enough to start out in photography. I would suggest you spend more money eventually on getting lenses rather than spending outrightly on a camera body and then having no budget at all in the future to spend on lenses. So remember this, camera body is important of course, but lenses or glasses are way more important than just camera bodies. All right, somebody else is asking me a question here which seems very interesting. For smartphone photography, which layout of camera would you suggest? Rectangular, example 1+, circular, or the iPhone layout? Personally, I use Android, so I would suggest a rectangular layout also, because rectangular or 16:9 aspect ratio, which we call, is a widescreen format which gives me more leverage when it comes to sharing on social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I am somebody who shares a lot of my pictures on social media because half of my work constitutes social media. So I would suggest personally to go out for a layout which gives me a widescreen format like 16:9, which I am filming on right now on a phone. And then what happens is you can then create that picture wide enough to be which is exact fit for your social media requirements. Also, I think I have another question here. To shoot video on YouTube, what will recommend, phone or DSLR or mirrorless? Well, for shooting videos on YouTube, if you have good light inside your house or wherever you're shooting, a mobile phone is just fine. If light is a concern, if you think that you might not have artificial light, you might not have control on your lighting conditions, then I think a mirrorless camera makes more sense. Of course, the DSLR is also good enough, but DSLRs are way bigger in size as compared to mirrorless camera. So I think for now, for the 2021, mirrorless cameras are the future. So I think if you have control over light, go for a mobile phone which works perfectly fine. If you think you do not have control over light, you do not know where will you shoot, if you shoot outside a lot, in darker conditions a lot, then I think a real camera, so to speak, works better. I think I have another question here. All right, Abhinav Pandey asks, Nikon, Canon or Sony? Between the three, I think Sony makes the cameras with greatest dynamic range. Nikon, I haven't used much. Canon, I have always used. I love Canon for the kind of colors that Canon produces, for the kind of warmth that the Canon files have, and of course for the kind of overall look that Canon images have. Also for the skin tones, I think Canon files are way better than any other manufacturer. That's just me. I'm not really brand specific here, but that's just me because over the past 10 years, I've shot a lot of Canon. So I think Canon is something which my heart yearns for, because I think the colors, the skin tones are perfect when it comes to the files. All right, another question I had here, how to get a creative shot from a simple object like modern art type. I get this question a lot. How do I create really good pictures, so to speak, from simple objects? It is all about how you look at that particular object. For example, I have this camera right here, right? So this in itself is one object. Now from this object I can create a multiple picture. For example, I have this dial here. If I come close and create a picture of this dial itself with my phone, for example, putting it on macro mode, that in itself would be a very detailed image which might give an idea of a so-called fine art. Let's not get into fine art in detail, but you need to understand the fact that when you look at a subject, you need to look at it in detail. Take your time, look at the subject, understand the subject matter better, so that you need to understand, so that you get an idea about how to go ahead and create pictures. For example, if I give you a camera today and ask you to create 15 good pictures with it of a single subject, will you be able to do it? That is the question. Now also the fact that 15 or 20 pictures in one subject might not be an easy going thing. So you need to understand that you need to constantly keep creating pictures, so that you need to understand better how a subject works. So I'll give you an example. So I am always asked to create pictures of cars and bikes, right? So for example, there is one car which I create pictures of. I need at least 25 good pictures which should go on the brochures, which should go on the internet, which should be printed. So you understand the fact that a car is just an object. It's just an object. I mean, getting 25 good pictures of a car used to be a tough task for me earlier, maybe, I don't know, 7-8 years back. But eventually I learned the fact that a car is an object which is really beautiful. I fell in love with the entire look of it. Any car you give me in today's date, I can create 20, 25, even 30 pictures out of it. So you need to understand, to create a fine art sort of a picture, you need to understand the subject matter better. You need to understand the subject, you need to look at it in detail, and then take your time and then shoot. Do not be quick, you know. I understand it's not film, it's digital. You do not have time to waste. You just point your camera and shoot. But I wouldn't suggest you do that. You go ahead and take your time, look at the scene, look at your subject, understand your subject better, look at the subject from different angles, look at it from a low angle, look at it from a high angle, and then decide what angles work better for that particular subject, because the kind of angle that you shoot a subject from really matters a lot. So since we are always looking at any subject from our eyes, from the perspective of a human eye, we are so used to this human perspective that whenever you give me a camera, for example, I'll just shoot from this perspective. But why don't we go a little low? Why don't we go a little high and then shoot and then see the resulting image? I'm sure even if it's a so-called boring subject, the resulting image would be really interesting for the viewer who would be looking at your image. All right, so do you have another question here? Yeah. Medha asks, is photography something that can be self-taught, or some course is necessary to become a professional? Well, technically speaking, Medha, I am not a photographer as far as my studies are concerned. I never studied photography. I am a commerce graduate, and then I moved on to doing masters in English and then eventually psychology. So you see, there is no photography involved in my study, at least. But then again, these days there are a lot of courses, basic courses are there. So I think a lot of basic courses are very helpful. Like Graphy, for example, you guys provide a lot of Graphy provides a lot of videos, photography videos. So I think videos like these and a lot of other books are very helpful. Even if you do not want to go to a classical classroom as such, you can go ahead and watch a lot of videos on YouTube. You can go ahead and probably read a lot on the internet and then learn yourself. Of course, a little bit of technical knowledge is necessary, which you can find online very easily. And I believe that the rest of it comes while you are shooting, while you are on the job, so to speak. You have to go out, shoot more, create pictures, and then understand how it works. Of course, you'll go out for the first time, you will fail, you will create some really crappy photos, come back, feel sad about it. But then again, the next time you go, you would know what mistakes not to make. And I think it is absolutely imperative that we make mistakes to understand better what mistakes to not make the next time we go ahead and create pictures. So yes, to answer your question simply, I do not necessarily think that a course is necessary. I think online resources are more than enough to understand and to learn the art of photography. Rest of it, you have to go out, shoot, and then learn on the job. All right. I think we have another question here. What is a good lens for portrait photography? Well, if you are having a camera, if you shoot with a camera, I think nothing better works than a 50 mm lens. That is the second lens which I suggest, or which every photographer would suggest you get after you get into photography with a kit lens, because the 50 mm lens will give you that nice depth of field. It will give you a nice compression. It will give you a brilliant image quality. So to answer your question simply, 50 mm lens, the f1.8 versions are very cheap these days. Go get one of those and create some great portraits. All right. Medha, you are very welcome. Roshan says, which mode should we use for best photo? Well, there is nothing called a best photo, Roshan. Anything that you create which you think is good might not be good for me, and subjective. You know, photography is very subjective. So best photo is something which has a good image quality, which details the subject really well. And I think for that, if you are asking about mobile phone, I think the default camera works really nice. Like I've said a while back, if you want to shoot good depth of field images, good portrait images, go to live focus or live view or portrait mode, depending on what phone you are using. These days, every phone has a live focus or a portrait mode. Use that if you are if you are shooting portraits of your friends or family members, but also make sure that you are shooting under good lighting conditions. Why do I say so? I say so because I have said it a little while back. The sensor of the phone camera is really tiny. So the light gathering capability of the camera sensor of your phone is really minuscule. So I would suggest you, whenever you are shooting pictures on your mobile phone, try and make sure that there is a lot of light. Also, if you are shooting under low light, for example during the evening hours or during the sunrise hours, I would suggest you go to night mode. I'm sure your phone and every other phone these days have a night mode. Go to the night mode, shoot in night mode, because I think night mode keeps a very nice balance between highlights and shadows. Like I said a while back, the dynamic range is what creates some good pictures. Of course, you need to play around with editing as well. I would just come to editing in a while, but go to night mode if you're shooting in low light, or if you're shooting in bright daylight conditions. I think the normal camera, which whenever you're opening the camera app, the normal lens which opens takes the best pictures possible. All right. Coming into editing part, I think a lot of people have this agenda with them, that editing is not really photography. I completely disagree. As a professional, I think I shoot a lot of images in a year, thousands and thousands of images in 1 year, and all those images are shot in what is called a RAW format, RAW. Now, what is RAW format? RAW format is nothing but what you see is what you get. RAW format does not process your images at all before they save it in the camera memory card or your phone memory. So there are a lot of phones as well which shoot RAW these days, and of course every camera shoots RAW. There are two essential file formats that any camera shoots in: RAW and JPEG. JPEG, JPG format is the default format which we get when we are using any phone or any camera. RAW format is more about how you process your image, because an unprocessed image, an unprocessed RAW image is of no use to me, because a RAW image has to be processed before it can transferred into a JPEG image to be delivered to a client, or even if I want to use it on social media. A lot of phones these days use raw format images as well, because I think a lot of people these days ask for raw format because they enjoy the editing process. If you enjoy editing process, I think it is really nice. I completely disagree with the fact that editing an image is not really contributing to photography. I think editing an image enhances the image further rather than doing anything else. Yes, of course, if you overdo anything, that's wrong. I would suggest you keep it to a bare minimum, you keep it to a control level. For example, if I'm using a mobile phone, I use Snapseed a lot, but then again I make sure that I do not overdo it, because overdoing any image will of course create a very bad impact. Colors, highlights and shadows will be burnt completely. The saturation levels would be completely over the top, which would create a very kind of a fantasy kind of an image, which is not something which I really like. That look is not my kind of look. So you need to edit your pictures, absolutely. Do you need to go overboard? No. Keep it minimal, keep it simple, and I think your pictures would tell a story about whatever you are shooting. Let's see, what other questions have we got here? Prerna Gupta says, loved your Snapseed editing videos. Thank you, Prerna. Thank you so very much. I personally love editing and I would try to continue doing that as well. Which is the best phone under 20K category if you have tested any? Lakshay, I test a lot of phones on my personal channel as well. I think under 20K, there are a lot of phones from Samsung, Oppo, Vivo. Get whatever you want. Just make sure that those meet the kind of requirement that you have once you are going to get that phone. Study a lot, do your research, watch YouTube videos, and then decide out of 2 or 3 phones which phone under 20K category suits you better. All right, somebody asked me, Priyanshu Tiwari asks me, sir, what is aperture? Now, aperture is, let me talk to you in a very simple term. Now, aperture is nothing but a hole inside your lens. This hole that you see is what aperture is all about. Now, how does aperture work? Aperture lets light inside your camera sensor, which is absolutely amazing, isn't it? I mean, there is a hole inside a lens which according to your setting will of course grow bigger or grow smaller, whatever setting you have, and then accordingly it will let in more light. Technically speaking, the bigger the aperture hole size is, the more light it will let inside your camera sensor, and as a result, the more amazing, the more brighter your image will be. Of course, phone sensors have a limit, so you should of course look at the aperture. Also, aperture is denoted by a number called f number, and now f number is denoted as f1.8, f2, f2.8, f4 and so on. So you need to understand, the lower this f number is, the better the aperture is, the better the lens is. So you would see a lot of phone cameras these days have this number of f1.6, f1.4, which is really nice, but also what that does is it increases the price of the camera lens, it increases the price of the phone overall, because you have a aperture which is so bright. The lower the number of the aperture, the brighter it is, the better the overall image quality would be. The higher the aperture number like f4, f5.6, f8, not good. It would not let in much light. So I would suggest you get a phone camera or even a camera lens with the aperture which is bright enough so that you get more light inside your sensor, and then as a result you would get great images. All right, so the next question, I think I had one more question here. I just want to know for camera which is best according to you. Lakshay, I would suggest you get any camera phone this side of 20,000, maybe 18,000-19,000. You would find any Samsung or Vivo phone, which is a good investment right now, because I think cameras are getting so good these days. You do not need to spend so much of money to be able to get some great pictures. Also, I think camera lenses have become so nice these days. Even if you get a 15,000, 16,000 rupee phone, I think will be sorted. I use a Samsung F41 all the while, and I think that's for 14,000-15,000, and I love the camera. Overall camera quality is very nice. Of course, in low light it struggles, but then again, like I said a little while back, put it in night mode and I think it should do just fine. All right, so what else? I think when it comes to photography, if you want to pursue photography as a career, let me put it very shortly. I think we are running short out of time. I think I have about 5 or 7 minutes left. But if you want to pursue photography as a career, if you want to do good in photography, I think first and foremost, or the only thing which is required, is that you should have a great portfolio. Now, what is a portfolio? A portfolio is nothing but a collection of your best images, maybe 20 images, maybe 25 images, which are your best work. It should be work of art. Now, the kind of work that you do also depends on a lot of factors. So if I want to create pictures of landscapes in the future, I would rather want to have a portfolio which is consisting of a lot of landscape pictures, because it also depends on the kind of client that you are approaching. Because what happens is, if I'm approaching a landscape client, I cannot show my wedding work and vice versa. So you need to have good portfolio these days, and it has been true from all the while, from time immemorial. And if you have a good portfolio, then you can probably share that portfolio all across the web. These days, internet is a fantastic tool. Share it on your social media, share it with your friends and family and your prospective clients, and then see where it goes. But first and foremost, you need to understand you need to have a solid portfolio. If you do not have a portfolio, you just cannot walk up to the client and say that you need work. The client would of course ask, can I see your portfolio? Where is your portfolio like? So you need to understand you have to have a great portfolio, you have to have a good picture in your portfolio, and then go ahead from there. So I think I have answered a lot of questions. I have answered quite a few of your doubts as well. I will just check if I have any other questions which are left unanswered. All right, I think, all right, Priyanshu just asked me, I didn't understand the concept of FPS. Lakshya asked, what should be the best camera setting? Please tell us that also. Lakshya, frames per second or FPS majorly works when it comes to videos. We shoot cinema in something called 24 FPS. Then there is 30 FPS, then there is 60 FPS, and so on and so forth, which is for slow motion. So I'll just tell you simply, if you are shooting day-to-day videos, try to shoot it in 30 FPS or 24 FPS so that it looks more cinematic. The higher FPS you shoot at, it will create a little bit of issues, little bit of stuttering when you are editing the video. So try and shoot at 30 FPS. If you are shooting in mobile phones, generally mobile phones shoot at 30 FPS, which is fantastic. If I'm shooting a video in a camera, I generally keep it at 24 FPS, because that gives me the best cinematic quality. Of course, if you want slow motion, you can go ahead and shoot at 120 or even 240 FPS. I think there are Sony phones these days which shoot at 960 FPS, which is absolutely mind-boggling. So that is how frame rates work. Of course, it is just a basic understanding which I am giving you. It is much more than that, but just to answer you simply, if you are shooting on a day-to-day basis, shoot at 30 FPS, which is a default FPS, I think, which any camera mobile phone shoots at. Lakshay, you are very, very welcome. Priyanshu, ISO is just artificial lighting. No, Priyanshu, ISO is not artificial lighting. ISO is just the sensitivity of your sensor to catch more light. Of course, I understand since ISO increases the brightness of your image, you are bound to think that ISO is adding artificial light. It is not adding artificial light. It is just that it increases the sensitivity of your camera sensor to the available light. So if the light is really low, you'll keep a higher ISO. If the light is all right, if the light is bright enough, you would keep the ISO at a bare minimum. But the problem here is, if you shoot at a lot of high ISO images, like for example 800 ISO, 1600 ISO, or even higher, what happens is the image becomes grainy. That is only because the sensitivity of the light has been increased artificially. So I would suggest try to keep the ISO between 400 to 800 if you are shooting on a mobile phone. If you are shooting with a camera, then you can probably go ahead and shoot at 3200 ISO or 6400 ISO even, depending on the camera that you are using. But to answer your question simply, artificial lighting is not ISO. ISO is simply your sensitivity of the camera sensor towards the available light. The more the ISO number, the more grainier the picture would be. The less the ISO number, the more cleaner the picture would be. Of course, if it's low light, you would increase the ISO level, but try to keep it between 400 and 800 to get a balance between a clean image and a grainy image. If the light is really good, if you are shooting outdoor under good conditions, keep the ISO at a bare minimum like 100 or even 50 if that's available. All right. Lakshay, yes, Snapseed is a fantastic app to use. I use Snapseed all the while editing my images. Priyanshu, you are absolutely welcome, and I think that's about it right now. I also am running out of time. I think I would ask the Graphy guys to do another live session with me, because I need to understand many questions. I love the fact that you guys are having so many questions here, because the more questions you ask, the more clarity I think you will get. Alright guys, I think I'll end this live video here. Thank you so much you guys, everybody who joined in, everybody who had questions. Thank you so very much. Also thanks to Graphy India for inviting me over. It was a fantastic session, and I would like to remind you guys again, if you want to, you can go ahead in iOS or Android platform, download the Graphy app, use my subscription code, that's Bobby Roy, BOBBYROY, one word, no space in between. Use that and get a subscription for yourself, get a discount for yourself. I think also in the description below, the link would be there. Click that link, go to the app, get a subscription for yourself, and enjoy these learning videos. Thank you so very much guys. I am available on all the platforms, Priyanshu. on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook by the name Bobby Roy. You can go ahead, search for me, join me there, do whatever you need to. And if you have any more further questions, I would more than glad to answer, but not in this session, of course. It's already 7:40. And I probably will see you again in the next live session, whenever that might be, whenever I am invited. Thank you so very much, guys, and I am seeing you soon, hopefully. Enjoy. Bye bye.